My name is Alyssa Monroe, 33 years old, from Charlotte, North Carolina. People always say love changes you. I used to believe that was a beautiful thing. Now I know it depends on who's holding the blueprint. I work as a logistics supervisor for a regional grocery distributor. Managing 12 drivers and 2 overnight teams isn't glamorous, but I enjoy solving problems before sunrise. My boyfriend, Dylan Carter, was 29 and worked as a hairstylist at a salon near South End. We'd been together for 2 years and 8 months, and he'd moved into my apartment 11 months earlier after his roommate got engaged and ended their lease early. The apartment was entirely in my name. Rent was $1,740 every month. Dylan usually handed me $500 and smiled as if he'd done me a favor. I bring softness into this place. He'd joke whenever I mentioned bills. I used to laugh. I never figured out how softness paid the electric company, but somehow I convinced myself relationships weren't supposed to be measured like accounting spreadsheets. Looking back, that was my first mistake. Tiny disrespect has a strange way of dressing itself up as charm. When we first started dating, Dylan adored everything about me. He said I was dependable, grounded, comforting. He loved that every Sunday I cooked enough food for half the week. Every Wednesday evening I met my older sister, Madison, for basketball. Every other Saturday I drove across town to help my mother, Evelyn, with yard work because arthritis made even simple chores painful for her. Those routines made me who I was. Then, almost without warning, they became everything that was supposedly wrong with me. Basketball became childish. My pickup truck became embarrassing. Helping Mom too often meant I had unhealthy boundaries. Madison suddenly became a terrible influence simply because she was single and liked living life on her own terms. My apartment looked too masculine. My old college hoodie was apparently depressing. My playlists lacked sophistication. My closest friends had low ambition. Even my work schedule became evidence that I wasn't emotionally available enough for him. Every few weeks, another piece of me appeared on Dylan's invisible renovation list. At first, I gave in. Not because I agreed, because arguing felt exhausting. I stopped wearing the hoodie he hated. I skipped basketball twice. I quietly packed away my sports posters into the closet. Whenever people asked about my career, Dylan would casually say, "Oh, she basically works warehouse logistics." I managed 12 drivers and 2 overnight operations. That wasn't warehouse stuff, but I stopped correcting him. Every compromise felt tiny. Together, they became enormous. The strangest part wasn't how much I changed. It was how little satisfaction those changes brought him. Every sacrifice simply revealed another demand waiting underneath. The breaking point came on a Friday. 2 drivers had called in sick. One refrigerated truck had developed a faulty temperature sensor halfway through delivery. By the time I finally walked through my apartment door after nearly 12 hours, every muscle in my body ached. I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional. I was simply empty. The apartment lights were dim. A candle burned on the kitchen table. Dylan sat perfectly straight with a notebook open in front of him. The expression on his face reminded me of someone preparing to conduct therapy without a license. "We need to talk about your growth," he said calmly. I dropped my keys onto the counter. "Can I shower first?" "No." His answer came instantly. "You always avoid difficult conversations." I stared at him for several long seconds before slowly sitting down. Without another word, he slid a sheet of paper toward me. Across the top, neatly typed in bold letters, were the words, "Non-negotiables before we move forward." I began reading. "Sell the truck and buy something more mature. Stop playing basketball every week. Visit Mom only once a month. Stop helping Madison with projects or lending her money. Replace the bachelor furniture. Add Dylan to the apartment lease before renewal. Help pay off his credit card debt, because healthy partnerships heal together. Engagement ring before December." At the bottom he typed one final sentence. "If Alyssa cannot change, Dylan must choose himself." I read the page twice, not because I couldn't understand it, because I couldn't believe someone who claimed to love me had actually written it. The apartment became painfully quiet. I know it looks like a lot, Dylan finally said, but if you really love me, you'll understand. I looked up. How much credit card debt? His expression immediately tightened, like I'd asked the wrong question. Around 22. 2,200? He sighed dramatically. No, 22,000. The words hung between us. I slowly leaned back in my chair. Then he delivered the sentence I'd remember for the rest of my life. Change who you are, or lose me. There wasn't any anger in his voice, only certainty. He honestly believed I would fold, that I'd apologize, promise harder, negotiate, beg. Instead, I nodded once, then quietly answered, Then I'm already gone. He blinked. The confidence disappeared from his face for just a fraction of a second. What? You heard me. I folded the paper neatly and slipped it into my work folder. What are you doing? He demanded. Keeping documentation. One word. Documentation. It transformed his expression completely. He followed me into the hallway. You don't get to end this because I asked you to improve yourself. I stopped walking, then turned toward him. You didn't ask me to improve. My voice stayed calm. You asked me to disappear one piece at a time. He laughed. Or at least tried to. The sound cracked halfway through. That night I slept on the couch. Not because he told me to. Because I suddenly needed distance from someone who thought love meant remodeling another human being. The next morning, Dylan was gone. His toothbrush still sat beside mine. His suitcase remained in the bedroom. His laptop rested on the desk. At exactly 11 a.m., my phone buzzed. You have until Sunday to apologize and prove you can change. I stared at the message for several seconds, then typed one sentence. Sunday works. Have your things picked up by then? I pressed send. Somewhere deep inside me, a door quietly closed. I just didn't realize yet that Dylan was about to spend the next several months trying to kick it back open. The first thing I realized over the next few days was that Dylan genuinely believed I was bluffing. Not hoping, believing. He treated my text like a temporary tantrum instead of a final decision. Saturday morning, his friend Vanessa sent me a message. Alyssa, Dylan is devastated. He was only asking you to become the woman you promised to be. I stared at the screen for a moment before replying. He asked me to sell my truck, stop helping my mother, distance myself from my sister, add him to my lease, and pay off $22,000 of his debt. A few seconds later, she answered. He told me it was about emotional maturity. I took a picture of the list and sent it without another word. No response ever came. Around noon, Dylan arrived at my apartment with his older sister, Melissa. Melissa had always been kind to me. That afternoon, she looked exhausted, like someone who had driven across town knowing she wasn't getting the full story. I opened the door before they could knock twice. I'll bring your boxes into the hallway, I said. Before I could move, Dylan brushed past me as though he still lived there simply because he expected to. Quietly, I reached into my pocket, opened the recording app on my phone, and lowered it beside my leg. Audio only. No drama, just documentation. He immediately noticed. Are you seriously recording me? Yes. That's manipulative. It's documentation. There it was again. The word that seemed to bother him more than the breakup itself. Melissa frowned. What documentation? He keeps twisting everything, Dylan snapped. Without saying another word, I handed Melissa one of the 3 printed copies I'd made during lunch at work. She stood in the hallway reading. Her eyebrows rose a little higher with every line. Finally, she looked up. Dylan, what is this part about visiting her mother only once a month? My point was boundaries. Melissa ignored him. She turned toward me. Doesn't your mom have arthritis? I nodded. Pretty severe. Silence settled over the hallway. Melissa slowly folded the paper. I'm only here to help collect clothes. That tiny sentence felt bigger than any argument. Reality had entered the room. Dylan spent the next hour packing loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. Cabinets slammed. Drawers crashed. Closet doors banged against the walls. He threw insults into the air, hoping one would finally land. I hope your truck keeps you company. You should just marry your mother. You'll regret this when you're 40 and alone. I answered none of them. Silence frustrated him more than any comeback could have. Then he reached toward the quilt folded neatly across the back of my couch. It had belonged to my grandmother. I'll take this. No, it's part of the apartment. It's part of my family. You never cared this much before. I do now. For one long second, neither of us moved. Then Melissa quietly stepped between us, took the quilt from Dylan's hands, and placed it back exactly where it had been. Neither of us spoke. That told me everything. By Sunday evening, most of Dylan's belongings were gone. Not everything. He'd left shoes, decorations, toiletries, and 3 storage boxes in the closet. Instead of texting him, I messaged Melissa. Could you please arrange pickup for the remaining boxes within 2 weeks? She replied almost immediately. I will. I'm sorry, Alyssa. That apology stayed with me. Not because she was responsible, because it was the first genuine kindness I'd received all weekend. As soon as they left, I stopped waiting for the next disaster. I acted. The apartment keypad code changed. I paid a locksmith $120 to rekey the deadbolt. Then I drove directly to my bank and opened a brand new checking account. At first, that probably sounded excessive, until I remembered the 2 times Dylan had used my debit card for salon supplies without asking. $84 once, $117 another time. Tiny purchases. After reading that list, those charges suddenly looked different. Not accidents. Practice. I canceled every streaming subscription we'd shared, removed him from my grocery delivery account, deleted every automatic payment connection. Within an hour, Melissa forwarded me one of Dylan's texts. She's financially punishing me now. Melissa added only one sentence underneath. I'm staying out of this. For the first time in months, I smiled. Not because Dylan was struggling, because someone had finally refused to become another tool in his story. That evening I called Madison. I owe you an apology. For what? For disappearing. She stayed quiet, then laughed softly. I figured you'd come back eventually. I stopped showing up because it made things easier with Dylan. I know. You knew? Alyssa. Every time someone convinces you to shrink yourself, they eventually complain you're still taking up too much space. I leaned against my kitchen counter. My throat tightened. I'm sorry. You don't owe me anything. I do. No, she said gently. You just owe yourself better, I cried after we hung up. Not dramatic sobbing, just the quiet kind that comes when someone loves you without asking you to become someone else first. Monday morning I visited my apartment manager, Gloria. Dylan doesn't live with me anymore. She nodded. Was he ever officially on the lease? No. She smiled while typing a note. Then nobody but you can authorize changes. Simple. Professional. Done. Walking back to my truck, I realized how much peace lives inside uncomplicated facts. That evening, Dylan posted a story online. Black background. White letters. Some women hate when men encourage them to evolve. I actually laughed. A real laugh. The kind that catches you by surprise. A minute later, Madison texted me. Did he really call your truck emotional baggage? Apparently. Honestly, your truck has shown you more loyalty than he ever did. I saved that screenshot. Some days, encouragement arrives wearing sarcasm. 3 weeks passed. Then Dylan started rewriting history. According to him, I'd ended our relationship because I was terrified of commitment. He conveniently forgot to mention the lease, forgot the debt, forgot the list, forgot asking me to reduce contact with my own mother. One afternoon, one of his coworkers, Jasmine, sent me a hesitant Instagram message. I don't want to interfere, but Dylan says you left him homeless. I answered calmly. He's staying with Melissa. He had 2 weeks to collect everything. He was never on my lease. A pause. Then another message. He also said he paid half the rent. Without emotion, I exported 11 months of payment history. 5 payments of $500. 3 payments of $300. 3 months with nothing. I sent the screenshots. Jasmine replied only once. Wow. Okay. I archived the conversation. Then came the fake emergency. At 1:22. One morning, my phone buzzed from an unfamiliar number. I'm outside. I don't feel safe. If you ever loved me, let me in. Instead of answering, I checked my doorbell camera. Nobody. Not even a passing car. I texted Melissa. Is Dylan with you? 2 minutes later, she answered. Yes, he's asleep on my couch. Ignore him. I saved both screenshots. Documentation, always documentation. 2 days later, he crossed another line. The receptionist at work called my office. A man says he's your emergency contact. My stomach dropped. He wasn't. My manager, Curtis, walked with me to the lobby. Dylan stood there wearing black scrubs from the salon skincare department, smiling as though we'd planned to meet for lunch. I just need 5 minutes with Alyssa. Curtis looked at him. Are you family? We're basically family. No, I answered before Curtis could speak. One word. His smile disappeared. He quickly shifted tactics. I'm worried about her mental health. She's changed overnight. She's isolating herself. Curtis remained completely calm. If you believe there's an emergency, call 911. He pointed toward the exit. Otherwise, you need to leave our property. For a split second, I saw panic flash across Dylan's face. Not because he was being asked to leave, because someone else wasn't buying his performance. He left, but not before dropping a sealed envelope onto the receptionist's desk. Inside was something so unbelievable. I read it twice. An invoice. Across the top, relationship damages. Therapy sessions, moving expenses, replacement furniture, emotional support appointments, even a suit he'd purchased for a holiday party we'd never attended. Total, wit, 7 cents. At the bottom, he'd handwritten, since you refuse to change, you can pay for what you broke. I photographed every page before forwarding it to my cousin Rachel, a paralegal. Her reply arrived almost instantly. Keep everything. Pay nothing. Save every message. So I did. I thought that was the lowest point. I was wrong. Because a few days later, Dylan decided to knock on my mother's front door. My mother, Evelyn, was 63. She had one of the gentlest hearts I'd ever known, but arthritis had taught her patience in ways most people never understood. She spoke softly, smiled easily, and rarely argued. Until someone threatened her family. That Thursday afternoon, Dylan showed up at her front door carrying flowers. He cried before she even opened the screen door completely. According to him, I was throwing away nearly 3 years together because I was terrified of becoming a better woman. He said I had become cold, defensive, and emotionally unavailable. He insisted he still loved me and only wanted me to grow. Mom listened without interrupting. She let him finish every rehearsed sentence. Only then did she ask one question. Did you tell my daughter she should visit me less? Dylan froze. For the first time, he had no prepared answer. That was private. Mom folded her arms. So was my daughter's life before you tried managing it. His face lost its confidence. I saw the list, she continued. You wanted her to stop helping me because my arthritis was inconvenient to your relationship, he tried to explain. You don't understand the context. I understand enough. She opened the door just wide enough to hand him back the flowers. Then she smiled politely. I think it's time for you to leave. The door closed. Conversation over. A few minutes later, Mom called me. I handled your little project manager. I laughed. He wasn't carrying a clipboard. No, she replied. Spiritually, he was. I laughed so hard I had to pull my truck into an empty grocery store parking lot. It was the first time in weeks that happiness felt effortless. Unfortunately, Dylan wasn't finished. The calls continued, always from new numbers. Sometimes the messages were cruel. You're emotionally stunted. No healthy man will ever stay with you. You'll die alone. Other times they were strangely gentle. He missed my cooking. He missed my dog, Cooper. He wanted closure. He wanted one last conversation. He even wanted to return the old hoodie he'd spent months mocking. Every voicemail went into the folder. Every text became another screenshot. Every number joined the growing list. Eventually, Rachel arranged for her supervising attorney to send Dylan a formal cease and desist letter. No workplace visits, no visiting my apartment, no contacting my mother, no messages through friends. Any remaining belongings would be exchanged only through Melissa. His response came by email. One sentence. "You're proving my point. You'd rather involve lawyers than change." I printed it, added it to the folder. Then something remarkable happened. Silence. 9 beautiful days. For the first time in months, my nervous system finally relaxed. I started playing basketball with Madison every Wednesday again. I wore my faded college hoodie to the grocery store without wondering whether anyone thought it looked childish. I spent Saturdays helping Mom build raised garden beds in her backyard. The boards weren't perfectly straight. Neither were the flower beds. She loved them anyway. Cooper and I visited the dog park almost every evening. Little by little, life stopped revolving around conflict. Then, on a Tuesday night at exactly 10:38 p.m., my phone notified me that someone was at my front door. I opened the security camera app. Dylan. He stood beneath the porch light holding a large black trash bag. He looked directly into the camera. "Since you won't change," he said calmly, "I'm returning everything that reminded me of the fake version of you." He dumped the bag across my welcome mat, then walked away. I waited until he drove off before opening the door. Inside the bag were pieces of our past. Photographs cut into tiny strips. My favorite hoodie sliced down the middle. A broken picture frame, with shattered glass still inside. And Cooper's old leash. The leash had disappeared the week Dylan moved out. I'd assumed I'd misplaced it. He'd taken it, without me ever noticing. Standing there on my porch, I realized this had never been about love. It had always been about ownership. I called the police non-emergency line. The responding officer watched the security footage, reviewed the cease and desist letter, and quietly said, "If you want this behavior to stop, file for a protective order." So I did. Court was scheduled 3 weeks later. Dylan arrived wearing a cream-colored sweater and soft makeup that made him look exhausted rather than aggressive. If someone hadn't known the story, they might have believed he was the victim. Melissa came too. She sat several rows behind him instead of beside him. That small decision spoke louder than any testimony. I carried one thing into the courtroom. A thick folder. Inside were months of documentation. The original list, payment records, screenshots, doorbell footage, the workplace incident report, Mom's written statement, Melissa's messages proving the fake emergency, photos of the destroyed belongings, the cease and desist letter, his final email. Nothing dramatic, just facts. When it was his turn, Dylan told the judge he had only wanted to encourage healthy personal growth. He claimed I became hostile because I couldn't accept constructive criticism. He said he'd invested almost 3 years into our future, only to be abandoned. The judge asked for the list. He read every line without speaking. Finally, he looked up. "You instructed her to reduce visits with her mother." Dylan straightened his shoulders. The family dynamic wasn't healthy. The judge glanced toward my mother's statement. "It says her mother has arthritis and relies on her help with yard work. That's not really the issue." The judge continued reading. "You also requested to be added to an apartment lease despite contributing only a small portion of the rent." Dylan didn't answer immediately. Instead, tears appeared. Carefully controlled tears. The kind designed to make everyone else feel guilty for continuing the conversation. But the judge wasn't there to rescue feelings. He was there to evaluate evidence. After reviewing everything, he granted a 1-year protective order. No direct contact. No third-party contact. No visits to my apartment. No workplace visits. No going near my mother's home. Any remaining property would be collected through Melissa within 7 days. Just like that. It was over. Outside the courtroom, Melissa caught up with me. "Alyssa." I turned around. She looked exhausted. "I'm sorry." I smiled gently. "I know. He always called control standards. I know. You didn't do anything wrong." Those 5 words mattered more than I expected. Not because I needed validation. Because someone who loved him had finally recognized what had really happened. I never exposed Dylan online. I never posted screenshots. I never tried to ruin his reputation. I simply stopped protecting the lies. Eventually, people compared stories. Vanessa had seen the list. Jasmine knew about the rent. Melissa stopped covering for him. The truth assembled itself. Meanwhile, my own life became wonderfully ordinary. I renewed my apartment lease alone. Gloria congratulated me and joked that tenants who always paid on time were impossible to replace. Curtis promoted me to regional route coordinator that December. The raise added $9,500 a year to my salary. I celebrated by buying new tires for the same truck Dylan wanted me to sell. Madison and I drove it to Asheville one weekend. We played terrible pool, ate barbecue, laughed until our stomachs hurt. Not once did anyone criticize who I was. Months later, I met someone new. His name was Nathan Brooks. He was a dentist with a dry sense of humor and an impressive ability to lose every trivia game while remaining completely confident. On our 3rd date, I summarized Dylan's infamous list. Nathan listened quietly. Then he smiled. "I believe people should grow." I nodded. "So do I," he continued, "but they should still recognize themselves afterward." That sentence stayed with me, because he was right. I did need to change. I needed stronger boundaries. I needed to stop confusing peacekeeping with kindness. I needed to stop shaving away pieces of myself simply because someone else found them inconvenient. Real love never asks you to abandon your family. It never asks you to surrender your friendships, your hobbies, your home, your dignity, or your identity just so someone else feels more comfortable. Dylan wanted to renovate me into someone easier to control. Instead, I became someone impossible to manipulate. The best change I ever made.